15 years, the damage that load shedding has brought to this economy has been incalculable.
The death toll from the recent floods in the South African province of KwaZulu-Natal has risen to 49.
After a fairly subdued night, the Knysna fires have begun to grow again.
We begin tonight with a nation already on edge in the coronavirus pandemic as protests turn violent.
London's burning and no one seems able to bring it under control.
You're listening to Off-Grid Survival, South Africa's first prepper podcast. And we are your hosts, Brett and Ben. Ben, welcome back to our podcast. Can you believe that we're actually doing this? I must say, it's something I've been wanting to do for a while now, and I'm really glad you were able to join me in this journey.
Hi, Brett. I still can't believe you got me in front of a mic.
Yeah.
If you think I've been being too quiet, please send me a strongly worded visual hint.
No, I don't think we've got anything to worry about there. We'll crack on. For the record, everybody, the date today is the 21st of April. It's a Sunday. We're busy recording. And the world is getting weird, dude. Internationally, there's still the war between Ukraine and Russia that is going on. Iran just tried to attack Israel by firing 300 cruise missiles and drones, which were stopped apparently by US and Israeli forces. There have been 2 major knife attacks in Sydney, of all places, in the space of 3 days. And Dubai, this desert city, is literally underwater. They had more rain in one day than they have normally in a year. Then we're gearing up for elections in South Africa. Things are starting to get a little bit heated on that front, I've noticed. All the posters are going up on the lampposts, and I'm seeing a lot of political advertisements everywhere at the moment.
Yeah, it's like a mid-year Christmas lights.
Yeah, I know, it's insane. So I'm already sick of seeing green posters and blue posters and red posters all over the place. Then we've still got another month and a half of this to go. Then we had some severe weather in the Western Cape this last week. Gale force winds in Cape Town, causing some quite severe fires. Some of the videos that I saw were insane, of fires jumping from house to house down near Simonstown. We had some flash flooding up here on the Garden Route. I think if they hadn't have got the mouth at Wilderness open in time, they would have had some serious problems there. It was literally on people's door. The river was on people's doorsteps. And then apparently Margate up in KZN, they've got hit by like a tropical cyclone, and parts of the town have literally washed away.
Yeah, I was looking on, I think it's called Windy, and you could see the movement of the winds moving around.
Yes.
And it looked like a couple of big hurricane type storm cells south of South Africa.
Yeah, no, it's I use what's that app? AccuWeather. And in that you can actually go in and see, you can zoom out and see the entire world where all the storm cells are. It's quite fascinating to watch.
Yeah, this is the best time to actually start thinking about prepping. I mean, not the manic buying of toilet paper as with COVID.
Yes, the good old toilet paper wars of 2020. We do live in interesting times, don't we?
Yeah. Without going into politics, I reckon everyone in South Africa should evaluate their choice in May based on who won't infringe on their right to and ability to equip themselves.
I agree. I think everyone should vote, but choose wisely. Don't fall for the rhetoric and fast talking that politicians are obviously so famous for. Look at what they're saying a couple of levels down from the rhetoric, basically. Unfortunately, when it comes to politics, you have to sometimes choose the lesser of two evils. In the past couple of weeks, I put some messages out on social media, mainly Facebook, on some of the prepping groups, to try and gauge what kind of topics people would like us to discuss.
Let me guess, the ideas varied widely?
Good guess, yeah.
So where do we kick off?
We're going to start in the beginning. We're going to start at the beginning because it's a good place to start. So what is prepping? According to Google, prepping is the practice of making active preparations for a possible catastrophic disaster or emergency, typically by stockpiling food, ammunition, and other supplies. And I think in the context of what we're going to talk about today, we'll be looking almost exclusively at what I consider the three primary aspects of prepping. And those all come down to the rule of three.
Is that the idea that bad things happen in a group of three?
Not quite. Basically, the rule of three states that in extreme conditions, the human body can only go 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. If you were on top of the Drakensberg at night in the middle of winter and it was snowing, you would probably die or at least experience severe hypothermia if you didn't find shelter within 3 hours. But regarding what we're talking about, what is shelter? I think of shelter as anything from a tent to a car to a house. And as a prepper, unless you're planning to hit the road and bug out as soon as any problem hits, then your home is your primary shelter. It's also your safe space and most likely place where you'll keep all your preps. Why would you move from a safe, secure, fully stocked home unless it was really dire?
So what happens when your home stops being secure? For example, flood, fire, or an invasion of zombie snails?
That's where having a bug-out bag comes in handy. In the case of an evacuation, and you can attest to this actually happening, you were right there in the thick of things during the Knysna fires of 2017.
Yeah, a grab bag is important, but if it's not on you like a EDC setup, then the grab bag is at home, and what if you can't make it home? And in the 2017 fires, we couldn't make it home. And all I had was what I had on me. And we spent most of the night outrunning places that were burning. The cell phone towers went down, and we resorted to our radios.
Jeez.
And my spare radio was at home in my grab bag. It made me see that all the prep I had done was useless if I didn't have it on me.
Yeah.
If we didn't know, or should I say, I didn't know that my house had survived. My kids were with my parents and had to be evacuated out on the beach. I drove through a desolate moonscape the next morning to get home and to discover that the house had survived, which is great.
Yes,
and the mental anxiety of not knowing is severe. We had no water or electricity for long after the fire and still had to deal with spot fires. You couldn't buy a Jenny for love or money in Knysna.
Yeah, that's crazy, dude.
Yeah, it is. So, Brett, as a mental exercise, if I walked in now and told you you had 5 minutes and you needed to be on the road, a tidal wave is going to wipe out the town, what will you pack and how?
Wow, dude. Okay, I love this question. These thought exercises are some of the best ways of actually learning how to prep. So I've got 5 minutes, you said?
Yes.
Okay. In the lounge is my EDC and my FAK. Okay. FAK for everybody, that's first aid kit, for those of you that don't know. I keep those in the lounge and I'd leave those there for now because that I'll get on the way out of the house. So I'd run upstairs to the bedroom and in the cupboard is where we keep our bug-out bags. I'd grab the 2 bug-out bags, mine and the wife's, and I'd also grab my comms, my radios that are on the charging station in the bedroom. I run back downstairs, give the wife her bag, her radio, and the first aid kit so she could get down to the car and start packing. I'd grab my bug-out bag and my EDC, which has got some extra gear in it, as well as things like my Leatherman and a couple of extra knives. And I'd grab my 7-day food box. This is something we'll discuss about later. And if I still had time, I would then go and empty my safe. And I'm pretty sure I'd be able to do that all in under 5 minutes. Oh, and don't forget the car keys.
Yeah. Don't forget the car keys. I noticed you didn't mention personal documents, all that type of stuff. Do you have it digitized?
So I've got certified copies of that in my bug-out bag.
Oh, that's great.
Not originals.
Yes.
Originals are all kept in the safe. That's why I said if I had time, I'd go back and empty the safe.
Yes.
And things like my ID and my driver's license are in my EDC. It's something I carry with me every day already. But having those extra documents, insurance documents, marriage certificates, property certificates, anything else like that you can make certified copies of, that should be in your bug-out bag. Yeah, definitely birth certificates. Yeah. That should all be in your bug-out bag already.
That's a good idea. It helps to plan ahead and have digitized documents online or a memory stick. Most people had very little time to move in 2017. Our first stop was at a friend's house, only to have the fires crest the hill, and we left within 6 minutes.
Yeah, I know one lady, she got a phone call and was told, you've got 5 minutes to get out. And she grabbed her then baby's nappy bag and her wedding dress and the wedding photograph album. And her handbag, and that's all she grabbed. And she got out, and they got out just in time. The entire road was evacuated. When they eventually got back to their house, when they were allowed to go back, the house on either side of hers was untouched, and her house was gone.
Yeah.
The only things that was still standing, I've seen the photos, was a brass bedstead and the outdoor braai area. There was a pot plant on either side of the briar area. Not a flame touched those leaves. They were still green. Yeah. But the entire house was gone. But she took the wrong stuff.
Yeah.
Like, yes, the nappy bag and stuff is essential for a baby. But why do you need your wedding dress? You can't eat your wedding dress.
Well, this is the problem. A lot of people don't think through what ifs, You do, what if a bird flies in the window now? What if hand grenade comes through the window now? What if, you can be the most weird and outlandish what ifs, but it gives your brain something to think about. And in severe and extreme circumstances, you can go back to that, and you've got like pre-recorded responses to things.
Yeah, but that's why having a bug out bag is so essential, or having some form of EDC is so essential that you've got things ready to go. So you don't have to think about what if. You've got time now to go, okay, the bag is on my left-hand side as I go out the door. What else can I grab? I've got 5 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, I need to go more nappies for the baby, or grab food, or go grab 2 5-liter bottles of water.
Well, with another friend of ours, I just said, we didn't know what we were going to do. So I said, where's your cooler box? So I took everything out the freezer that I thought that we could use depending on where we were going to be, because we didn't know if the house was still going to be standing. So I just dumped all of that, and we put everything in the cars and we left.
No, at least you had some food with you. So many people, from what I heard with the Knives and the Fires, by the time they got down to the field where everybody was congregating, the biggest problem was that there was no food. People were running to takeaways and shops just trying to get food. Now, if you've got a kit that's got some rations in it, at least you'll have something for yourself. Admittedly, you want to help as many people as possible, but that might not be the situation at the time.
You always have to help from a place of strength. Yeah. Your family first. You got to be strong. Your family's got to be strong and protected.
Definitely.
And then you can help.
When it comes to bug out bags, there's a guy that I've been buying gear from probably for about 2.5 years now, Mornay. He's got a little company up in PE called Bug Out SA. And just as a thank you for everything he's done for me over the years, I noticed the other day that they had a little ad blurb on Facebook, and I took the opportunity to do a cheeky little read of their ad. So, I think we can listen to that now.
Oh, that would be great.
Gear up for anything with Bug Out SA. They're your go-to source for top-quality bug out bags and survival gear, proudly serving South Africa with lightning speed delivery via the courier guy. Their rave reviews on social media speak volumes about their dedication to customer satisfaction. At Bug Out SA, they're not just selling products, they're building relationships with their amazing customers. Explore their extensive range of bug out bags, tactical backpacks, survival accessories, knives, shelter solutions, MREs, water purification gear, first aid kits, and more, all available on their user-friendly website at www.bugout.co.za. Whether you're preparing for a weekend adventure or gearing up for potential emergencies, Bug Out SA has you covered with standard 24-hour and 72-hour bug out bags, as well as custom-designed options tailored for your unique needs. Join the Bug Out SA family today and experience the peace of mind that comes with being prepared for anything. Order now and let them show you why customers become friends at Bug Out SA.
That's interesting. I've not bought from him, but we'll definitely look at his site.
Yeah, cool. Just to clarify, this wasn't a paid ad. I did this because I can.
Of course.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to our second main issue, water. In a mobile situation, like when you're hiking, 4x4ing, or in the case of bugging out, having lightweight water purification is really important. Let's go back to the fires. Say you're stuck in the mountains. You're secure and you have shelter from the fire, but you only have 2 liters of drinking water. You don't know when you're going to get clean water again. Without a way of filtering river water that has already been polluted by ash, you are going to get into real trouble as extreme thirst takes over.
Yeah, but to clarify, South Africa, you can drink most of the rivers. We don't have the same problem as the US with whatever they get from the wolves and that. But depends where in South Africa you are.
Yeah, so I would be quite comfortable drinking river water in the high mountains, say in the Cederberg or somewhere like that, where it has been filtered through the shale band and there's no farming happening in the higher elevations. Once you start getting down to the lowlands, like here on the garden route, then you're starting to get farms and human settlements that are polluting the water sources. And especially with what's been happening in Neisner lately, the lagoon is a brack water system because it's open to the sea. But I'd be very wary about drinking anything that comes off the nearby hills.
Well, with the Neisner River, for argument's sake, it's got so many tannins in. It's got it's a higher acidity level, so it takes care of most of the problems.
Yeah,
and there's not much runoff from farming into the Neisner River. You do get it, but on a scale, I would drink Neisner River water unfiltered, and I do. But there's a lot of other rivers where they do mass farming, that you wouldn't want to drink the Orange River.
Oh, definitely. And once you start getting up into areas like KZN and stuff with those massive sugar plantations, I'm sure that water has got some interesting chemical compounds in it. Never mind the stuff that's running off from, like I said, from human settlements.
Unwanted nutrients.
Yeah, unwanted nutrients, yeah. And then, of course, you've got problems like, as you get into the northern parts of South Africa, with things like bilharzia.
Yes.
Which is a very severe...
I think you get it down here as well. Just
not to the same extent as you would in, say, Mpumalanga or Limpopo.
Yeah.
From my understanding, I've had no personal experience with it, and from what I've heard, you don't want to. It can be quite a nasty little bug.
Yes.
So in hot and windy conditions with very little water, your lips are going to chat. And after a day or so without water, your tongue will swell and you actually have trouble swallowing. So having filtered water is so important. You can try filtering the large particulate matter through like maybe your shirt or something like that. But all that's going to do is take out big chunks of stuff. If you want to remove the small particles, the microbes and the bacteria, bilharzia and things like that we were just talking about, that these things can cause major gastric issues, you need a proper filter. There are many on the market in South Africa that are small and compact. Things like the Life Straw or a Soya Mini Filter. These are imported from the States. They're not particularly cheap, but they're not overly expensive either.
Yeah.
Your starting price on them, I believe, is around about 300 Rand for a Life Straw. And a Soya Mini, I've seen them as cheap as 500. It all depends where you buy it from. At the very least, you can use water purification tablets. And you get water drops as well. You can even use plain bleach, just a couple of drops of it into a big tank into a bucket of water.
I think Milton also works.
Milton works as well, but the problem with water purification tablets, with bleach, with things like Milton, is that flavor. Especially the water purification tablets, they leave quite a chlorine type taste.
But I believe if you leave it stand after it's done its duty, you let it stand for a bit, and the chlorine taste dissipates over time.
Okay.
But we normally you throw it in, you give it a steam and then you drink
because you're thirsty. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's horrible. But yeah, I've bought some of that, one of those mini soya filters, and it works well. And we have a water tank at work and goes through these filtering system, and the little pump and the filtering system gives it a taste I don't particularly like.
Okay.
But running it through that little soya filter takes that taste out.
Okay.
And it's actually just nice. And I've used it on the municipal water as well. I don't like the chlorine taste of purification tablets, but I always carry them in my first aid kit in case.
Yeah, so I've got a little vial of the chlorine tablets in my first aid kit. I've also got one in my bug out bag. They're two separate things. I'd use them for different uses. I don't necessarily take the bug out bag when I go camping, but I definitely always take my first aid kit when I go camping.
Yes.
So it all depends on the situation. And I remember back many years ago when I was working for a company in Cape Town called Camp and Climb, there was an American hiking brand called MSR that did really cool hiking stoves and other things like that. And they did a very cool ceramic water filtration pump system that screws onto your camel pack or your hydration pack. You basically pump a handle and you got clean water. But okay, let's just have a look online quick. Okay, so they're still available. It's called the MSR Mini Works. And oh, wow. Yeah, 3,795 Rand. So, yeah, that's pretty pricey in comparison to something like a Soya.
Oh, the MSR, because it's imported in South Africa with our exchange rate, they are really good and really expensive. So if you want to treat yourself to your many birthdays in one shot, go for it.
Yeah, exchange rate is definitely not our friend here. That's why we need to find South African companies that can make similar products and hopefully, get those prices down.
Yeah. The soya I found, makes the municipal water taste nicer.
Okay.
And talking about municipal, prep for the home should also include your rainwater tank in case of a grid down scenario.
Yeah, I don't have a JoJo tank or one of these big tanks because we're currently renting. We do have a borehole on the premises.
Potable or...
I'm actually not sure. I haven't tried drinking it, to be honest. We normally use it for watering the garden. In a situation where I needed to, I could probably filter that and it would be drinkable after definitely boiling at the very least. But the borehole relies on electricity. And this is South Africa. And with Eskom, the way it is, you can't always rely on that.
Yeah, electricity is a kind of a luxury at the moment.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, those 200-litre drums that you see advertised on Marketplace and stuff. If you clean those out and you use them as makeshift water tanks, it gives you 200 liters and they're easy to move if you move.
So 200 liters, that's a good amount. I don't even have one of those. What I've got at the moment is I've got two 25-liter clear drums of non-potable water. So that's used for things like flushing toilets and washing hands and washing dishes. And then on top of that, I've got 25 5-liter bottles of filtered water that we use on a daily basis. So we actually rotate that out regularly. And that's used for drinking and sometimes for cooking. I use mainly municipal water when cooking, but in a situation where the water wasn't running and we've had burst pipes recently here, we've got 25-liter bottles that we can just easily use for boiling water for pasta or for rice or whatever.
And coffee. Don't forget the coffee.
Coffee is always important.
Yeah. A lot of your water goes to coffee.
A lot of my water does go to coffee, yes. No, I'm a bit of a coffeeholic.
Yeah, we're talking about the cooking side of things. Food. Are we? What is your plan to talk about food?
So up next is we're going to talk about food. We've
noticed I'm getting hungry.
Maybe we should go order some pizza or something. We've covered shelter and water, which are considered two essentials, but food is probably one of the most controversial issues.
Why is food controversial?
Because guys are always arguing about the nutritional, how many calories each minimum amount of calories and that sort of thing. Where for me, from a more of a bug-in situation, the odds of us having to get to a point where we're calorie counting in a really dire situation, things have got to have gone really, really bad.
Well, if you bug in, you're generally working out your pantry, and if you've done your planning in your pantry, you should have the stuff you want to eat, and it's a lifestyle that you just buy one or two more every time you buy, and you don't use it up.
That's exactly what I did. When I started prepping, the first thing I did was buy cans of food, because when you're shopping, you just throw an extra can into the trolley, and it doesn't set you back a lot. For instance, when I started, a tin of tuna back then was 12 Rand.
Yes.
So grabbing an extra
tuna, do you buy the brine tuna, or do you buy with the oil?
I normally buy the brine, but I do have with oil as well.
With or without mercury?
Let's not go into that now. So 12 Rand for a tin of tuna. Back then it was like 8 Rand for a can of baked beans. Chuck those in the trolley. It's $20.
Yes.
20 Rand. And it's not a huge extra expense. And over time, you can quite quickly build up an additional supply of food.
Yes.
Over the space of 3 months of buying a little bit extra at a time, I built up a box that would supply the wife and I 2 meals a day for 7 days. So earlier on, I mentioned our 7-day box.
Yes.
And this is that 7-day box. The idea being that in a bug out scenario, I can grab that box. It's not huge.
Yes.
It only weighs about 4 kilos. I can chuck it in the back of the car. It's almost small enough to fit under the seat. If I rejig things a bit, maybe got a new packaging system, I could even get it under the driver's seat. But it's not a big box, is what I'm getting at. And over time, I've refined that box a bit, that every day is a different menu. So we're not eating the same thing day after day after day.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything worse than having to eat tuna for 7 days. I'd go insane.
Yes. Yes. So what is in your box?
Okay, so I've got rice that is broken down into smaller bags that is easy to use. This box is reliant on me having water and a cooking sauce.
Okay.
So
you don't have a little 500 bottles of water?
Not yet, no. That is something that I'm planning to get. But in this box is literally just food in this box. It has got cereal options in it. Those Future Life little sachets that you get.
Yes.
They're great because they're very compact. Bit bland, but with a bit of sugar, which I've also got in the box. I've got a small packet of sugar in there. I've got coffee in there. I've got tea. I've got a Game energy drink.
Yeah, that's important.
Great isotonic, gets those electrolytes back up, especially if it's hot and you're sweating and that sort of thing. And then I've got quite a bit of canned stuff in there. I've got bully beef, I've got tuna, I've got canned chicken.
Bully beef is important. It's like a staple. Most people hate it, but it's kind of like the American Spam, which
I was just about to say that's the South African equivalent of Spam.
Yeah, I think Spam's more pork, but the bully beef's obviously beef and whatever else they put in it. And yeah, you can fry it, you can eat it raw, you can cold. You can.
I've made stew with it before.
Yes,
I've done a bully beef stew.
I've made chips. You make
yes, you told me about
chips.
that. Yeah. I haven't tried that one yet. And then I've also got little extra things in there, like I've got a can of peaches.
Yes,
so that you've got something nice, because there's nothing worse than being in a bad situation and everything is bland.
Yeah.
So there's an importance of having things like little sachets of tomato sauce, having sachets of mayonnaise, little sachets of pepper, salt, some aromat, just to give your food flavor, because nothing worse than bland food. Yeah. Especially when you're feeling depressed because you're in a situation that's bad. Anything that can lift your spirits is going to help you survive.
Yeah. I think it's important to put more salt in than, not a little thing of salt. You can have a big thing of like a kg of coarse salt, properly vacuumed and stuff, because, one of these days we'll talk about food prep, like storage, curing, that type of thing. So if, for argument's sake, you bug out and you grab it and you grab a beef roast out of your freezer, at some point it's going to defrost. And if you've got salt, you can salt it and you at least preserve it at room temperature for
a couple of days extra. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, one of the things like storage is also always a problem when if you go over a lifestyle of using your pantry. If you use just a shelf, you put the new stuff in the front of the shelf and you use the new stuff off the front of the shelf. I've seen rack systems where you put your new can at the top, but it runs on an angle towards the back of the shelf and then back forward.
Those are very cool. So my issue with those rack systems is, as I mentioned earlier, I'm renting at the moment. If you've got your own place where you can build that in, that's awesome. Unfortunately, I'm not in that situation. I'm in a situation where I actually might be moving soon, and to take racking systems with is quite hard. So what we have is I've got those black big gym tubs, and all my food preps are in different tubs.
I have to say I prefer the Addis Tough Tote, because you can use them as a trestle. I've used them as a ladder when I had stuff in storage. So you pack them up and you make stairs and you climb to the top, and they can take quite a weight.
Yeah. So when it comes to bulk storage, I'm not a huge fan of the bulk rice and dried beans approach. As I mentioned just now, it's quite a bland food, and if you haven't cooked with it before, it's something you really have to practice with.
Yeah, but we in South Africa, it should be sampan beans, and then you just use a little bit of bovril, and it makes it a really nice.
We had that recipe the other day, and on that camp we went on, and I've never had samp in my life before.
What do you think?
I was impressed. It actually tasted good. It's a nice recipe, and I actually went and bought samp, which is now in my prep. Yeah. So where I'd always had things like rice was my priority, because I like rice, but I've got a variety of rice.
Yes.
I've got plain white rice, I've got tastic rice, I've got my favorite, which is basmati rice. I've even got brown rice, just to give variety. And that's stuff that I work through in my normal cooking routine.
Yeah.
So it's always changing over.
The lentils are nice as well, because you can also add them to your rice. They'll give you some protein, that type of thing. Change it up.
Well, with lentils and with other legumes, they are also a protein source.
Yes.
So
make quite a nice soup with them.
You can make soup. It goes into stews.
Or you can sprout them and have a salad-y type thing.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
With regard to long-term preps and that type of food, it's important that the food that you're prepping is food that you use and that you actually like eating. So for me, for instance, I'm allergic to shellfish.
Okay.
It's going to be pointless me going and buying tins of mussels because I can't eat them.
Okay, good to know. Okay. I know what won't be eaten out of my stash.
Yes. So I can eat things like tuna.
Yes.
But any shellfish I stay away from. So the wife might like it, but I don't. But we need to have food that we when we're cooking, we're going to not be cooking huge batches of food, and you don't want to cook separate meals. You want to try and keep everything contained.
Yes.
So rice and beans, and we don't even get what are those black pinto beans that the American guys are always going on about? I don't even think I've seen them in the shops here.
Yeah, we don't get the same type of the beans.
More those red kidney beans.
I think a lot of the stuff in America they farm with it, and so they have a lot of those. I don't like kidney beans, but those black beans that they use in the Mexican chili type of thing, they're really nice.
So you can get those tinned, but not dried. I haven't been able to find them dried. And like I said, it's not something I cook with on a regular basis, so it becomes a bit pointless me maybe storing it. I might get a couple if I find some. I'll probably end up getting some anyway, just to have as something different, but I'll have to actually try cook with it first in a normal situation.
And what would you suggest around, like getting wheat whole, dried, instead of flour? And I know you'd have to have a grinding system.
But that's the problem. You then need a way to grind it. I don't have a hand grinder, and I don't want to be in a situation where I've got to be sitting with a mortar and pestle grinding wheat to get a little bit of flour so I can make a bread roll. I would rather have bags of flour stored in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, heat sealed, and have those in a bucket or something that is easily accessible. Having things like wheat and that sort of stuff, that's if you're looking at super long term. Like in 10 years time, you're going to be digging this bucket out because that's your last resort food. I'm pretty sure that if we get to that point, we're going to be long gone by then. So
if you putting flour, ground flour in your prep, do you put yeast in, or do you go unleavened, or do you do it like a sourdough type vibe?
So I've got self-raising flour in my preps.
Okay.
And I've got normal baking flour as well.
Yeah, vacuum packed.
Not yet.
Okay.
I bought it recently. It is in a bucket. It's there's no pests that can get in, but I haven't had an opportunity to put it into Mylar at this point.
Yeah.
But from a storage point of view, like I said, I use those black boxes. And what I've done is I've separated out my main types of food into different boxes.
Yes.
So I've got one box which has just got my canned goods. And that's got beans, mushrooms, potatoes, carrots, or more the vegetable style stuff. Canned veggies, canned corn, tomato puree, tomato paste, all of that sort of thing. Then I've got another separate box which has got all my canned meats in it. Okay. So the bully beef, that canned chicken. There's a brand called Austin. I think it's available at Spar, and it's canned chicken breast.
Okay.
And it's got a little bit of a flavor, but if you mix some spices in with that, it's the same size as a tuna can.
Yes.
And I enjoy it. I actually make chicken mayonnaise with it fairly often. I think it's about 35 Rand a can. And from a protein point of view, that's a good, clean protein.
Have you tried this like soya mint stuff? I know Spar used to have their own brand that tasted nice. I don't know what the stuff about now.
Are you talking about the dehydrated soya mints or the canned stuff?
No, the dehydrated.
So there are a couple of brands on the market. The most popular one is Imanya, I think.
Yeah.
I'd have to go and check.
A lot of them have a very fake beef flavor.
Yeah, so the flavoring, you'll find that they add a lot of flavor to it. So it's tomato flavor, or it's chili flavor, or it's oxtail and onion with more hint on the onion.
Yes.
It's not bad. It's not great. It's not something I would personally eat every day, but I have cooked with it. I have eaten it. It cooks quite quickly. You don't have to soak it for a long period of time.
Yes.
And like I said, it does have flavor, and flavor is very important.
Do you collect, in your dry stuff, do you collect soups?
So I've got an entire collection of dried soups. I have my favorite.
Homemade or bought?
No, this is a bit of both actually, but mainly on the bought side. So I've got things like cream of mushroom soup, brown onion soup, hearty beef, tomato soup. Those powdered sachets last, they say 2 years on them, but that stuff, I'm pretty sure there'll be a nuclear apocalypse one day and you're going to find cockroaches and packets of soup.
Soups, I think, are important, especially these pre-made stuff, because if you go harvest a guinea fowl or a rat or whatever, eating unseasoned stew is not exciting.
Not at all.
And
no.
if you're running out, so if you're trying to extend your resources and you go harvest a game animal and you can put a sachet sachet of cream of mushroom or something in it just to bring flavor to the water that it's in. Then it's not stripping the flavor out.
I recently found at the one shop here in town a box of onion and garlic stock, soup stock.
Nice.
And I'm now using it in like everything I cook. It's just a teaspoon in, just adds that little bit of extra flavor. Even though I'm already using that garlic and onion in maybe the stew I'm making, it just adds a bit more depth of flavor.
So it takes a podcast from me to find this information.
Sorry.
Why are you keeping it to yourself?
Because they ran out of stock and I'm waiting for them to get it back in. And then I've got another box where it's got all my dry goods in it. So the pastas and rices and bags of salt.
Yes.
It's got things like desiccated coconut. If you ever need to make meatballs, it's a great substitute for breading.
Yes.
I'm just trying to think what I've also got in there. I've got bicarbonate of soda. I've got spices, chicken spice, steak and chop spice, all those Robertson spices that you get in the little boxes. They're already sealed in a Mylar bag.
Yes.
So I've got those boxes. I've got powdered mustard. Now that's a flavor that you can't replace. And it'll one day, just need a little bit of that mustard powder in something. And it makes such a difference to a dish.
Whole mustard seeds as well, You can put them. And they're also nice to add that little pop to.
Yeah, so that's my dry box. I've got a lot of dried stuff in there, and I found something really cool a while back. I haven't been able to get it again. I bought about 5 packets. Is dehydrated coconut milk. So it's basically powdered coconut, but very finely powdered.
Okay.
And you can make now a Thai-style dish.
Yes.
It adds a different level of flavor to something that you're cooking.
Is that like taking coconut powder, put it through a dehydrator, or just taking coconut flakes and...
I'm not actually sure how they did it. It does definitely taste more like coconut milk than like desiccated coconut.
Yes.
So it's got more of that coconut milk. It's got a creaminess to it.
Yes. Okay.
Imported product from Thailand, and I only saw it in the shop once, and I grabbed 5 of them, and I wish I'd grabbed 10.
Yeah. Something about your dry box, your salt. That's obviously it's packaged, but try double bag it because if it gets a tiny hole,
yes,
it'll draw moisture, and you'll have liquid in your dry bag.
Yeah. So my salt I've got coarse salt, medium grain salt, and fine salt, and they're in their original packaging, and that original packaging is in a Mylar bag,
nice,
zip-locked and sealed.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. And then I've got another box that's got liquids in it.
Liquids like?
So vinegar. Vinegar is great for preserving food. So I've got little 750ml bottles of white wine vinegar, brown vinegar, apple cider vinegar in there. I've got mayo. So mayonnaise doesn't have a long shelf life. As it comes from the shop, you could probably get a year to 2 years, but I've always got an extra jar in there.
Yes.
So I keep my liquids separate from my dry goods because the last thing you need is something bursting and trashing your entire dry goods stock.
And do you go for... do you stay away from glass, or do you just protect the glass?
As much as possible, I stay away from glass.
Okay.
I prefer using the plastic containers. Glass is great for if you're doing home preserving, but from a weight perspective, a space perspective, and a breakage perspective, I prefer plastic.
Well, at home, I use these, Nescafe coffee jars.
Yeah.
And you don't mess with the lid because that's got
a seal in it.
Seal in it. But what you do is you wash out the jar and then you take a freezer bag.
Yes.
And you put it inside the jar, and then you fill it up with the spice or salt or anything else that you have, and you take that bag and you twist it, the top down, you put it inside and you close it. And it keeps the stuff, because I buy spices on bulk, in bulk, and you make your own spices and mix it, and it keeps everything fresh for long.
Okay,
because
cool.
you're not...
Yeah, I'm quite partial to the Doe Egbert bottles with those little push lids there on top. I think they look a little bit nicer. So, but that's more for everyday use stuff, not for long-term storage.
Yeah, it's also it's too expensive to buy those bottles.
Yeah, the last thing you want is something breaking or bursting and you don't realize it happened. Then all your tins rust, your pasta gets wet. It's a total disaster. I had an issue a couple of months back where a dented can of mixed veggies rusted through, and because the sun was shining on the box for part of the day, the whole lot fermented and sprayed the inside of the box. I went to go get some coconut milk to use for dinner, and I opened the box and got this really bad smell. A ton of little midges came flying out, and there was this lovely layer of mold. It's not something you want to experience when you're busy making dinner. Luckily, we were able to salvage about 95% of the cans.
I suppose everything started rusting.
A little bit of rust, especially on the folded edges of the cans, but we lost all the labels. the labels were trashed. Luckily, we could tell what was what, and all the cans got washed, got dried, and then with a permanent marker on the top of the can, I wrote what it was and what the expiry date was. And I've actually started doing that with all my preps now. So Just in case.
That makes sense.
You never know when a lid is going to disappear. Also, the way I've stacked my cans in those big gym crates is they're stacked upright. So you take the lid off, you're looking down onto it.
Yes.
You can't see what it is. So having corn or mushroom or mixed veg, and then 25, 26, 28 for the year it expires. And then once a year, beginning of the year, I go through my box. Everything for that year that is expiring, for instance, this year, 2024, whatever's expiring this year gets taken out of that box, and that goes straight into our normal pantry. And that becomes the stuff that we use. That's something that I've got into a habit of doing.
Yeah, the only real spoilage I've had, I grew coriander one time and I kept the seeds for obviously use and forgot about them a little bit. And the next time I opened the container up, it was just full of weevils.
Wow.
So instead of throwing it away, I sowed it in the garden and a lot of it came up and I reharvested when I got seeds again. So not great for eating and the extra protein, but good for prep. Yeah.
So I've had weevils in just normal everyday pantry. We had weevils in our pasta that we got, and it came from the shop like that. And we hadn't noticed. And once they get out of the bag and they get into your cupboard, they contaminate everything. And this was quite a few years back, and we ended up throwing away bags of flour, packets of pasta, packets of rice, because the weevils had just infested the whole lot. Look, they're not going to kill you, but in an emergency,
the thought that counts.
But in an emergency situation,
eat the weevils.
You eat the weevils, but you don't want half of your stock being spoiled by insects.
Yeah, I think in the older days they just added more pepper to take away any weird taste of past.
I think they used to say on the sailing ships with the hardtack, they preferred the ones with the weevils because it made the biscuit softer.
Yeah.
So anyway, the next step in my preps was to get myself a dehydrator, something I'd always wanted. And I was lucky enough to find one on the markdown shelf at Clicks of all places. Just if you're looking, Clicks does have a markdown shelf and you can get some really good bargains there.
Nice.
This one had some slight damage to it. One or two little clips had broken. It's one of those circular ones with the stackable trays.
Yeah, and the same type.
Yeah, I think I paid like 400 Rand for it. I got 300 Rand off.
Nice.
So I was really chuffed with that. The only problem with that is it's only got an on-off switch. There's no temperature control to it.
Yeah, I've got one of the easy dry ones that I picked up secondhand. Had to do an element replacement, board replacement, but they work well. But it has at least a knob that you can select your temperature.
Yeah, this one from Clicks, like I said, it was literally on and off.
Yeah.
But I dried pineapple in it. I dried carrots. I dried mushrooms, and a couple of other things as well. And it worked really well.
Was it mushrooms or shrooms?
Mushrooms.
Mushrooms. Okay.
Mushrooms.
Yeah.
The edible variety.
Oh, no,
yes.
That's good.
But then I wanted to get bigger. Apparently, this is a common problem when it comes to food preservation, that we're not satisfied once we start with a small device. We've got to get a bigger device and do more food prep. So I ended up buying one online, digital. Okay, so it's got a digital timer that you can adjust up to 48 hours. And temperature up to 90 degrees.
Oh, nice.
So you can do jerky and that sort of thing in it as well.
Pasteurized stuff.
Yeah, it's got 6 metal grate trays. And that thing runs beautifully. My only problem with it was load shedding. Load shedding and dehydrating are not friends, because you want to keep that dehydration going on a continuous cycle. You don't want the stuff to cool down and then have to reheat constantly.
Yes.
And with, sometimes up to 4 or 6 hours in a 24-hour period that you're off, and you never know when you're going to be off. It just became too much of a pain.
Yeah, and otherwise you have to start looking at like solar or that type of thing.
So it's a 700-watt unit, and unfortunately, like I said, we're renting, and I just haven't had a chance to find a solar system that I can run just for my dehydrator. At the moment, that's a little bit out of my price range.
Yeah, well, I've also looked at wanting to do something like freeze drying, and with us sitting in South Africa, it's also way out of the price range, but you have the same problem with load shedding. You can't be halfway through a cycle and your the power goes off. Yeah. So you need a backup regardless.
So this dehydrator I've got, it's called a Hot Deco. If people are interested, it's a model 50352, and I got it on Takealot for just over 3,000 Rand. I think they're still available on there. And compare that to a Harvest Right freeze dryer from the States. I saw one a while back, and it was 100,000 Rand.
I've seen them at 150k.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, what home prepper can afford to buy one of those? And they consider those small desktop units. They're not even the industrial scale ones.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I look at the guys in the US, the prepper guys and stuff, and they show all these little models, and they do all these experiments and stuff, and you're like, there's no way we can afford to do it unless you're running a business. It's not something that you can quickly go play with.
Yes, definitely. So, yeah, no, upgrading to the digital one was definitely an advantage, but load shedding is killing me.
And what about storage? Do you vacuum pack?
So I've got heavy-duty vacuum polyurethane bags.
Okay.
So the stuff goes into there after I've dried it, and then I got the advantage that I can use one of our industrial vacuum sealers at work, and every now and again I'll take 20 or 30 bags to work with me, go in a bit early and run the vacuum sealer for like 15 minutes. It's really quick with those big ones, and I get a really good seal on it. What I have found though is be careful how you cut your veggies, because even with the heavy duty bags, if you've got something that dries to a sharp corner, when that vacuum sealer pulls down, it will puncture those bags.
Even if you're doing freezing, because if you cube carrots or something and it's frozen, it moves around in the freezer, it punctures a hole, and then you get freezer burn.
Yeah, so what I did is I quartered carrot slices, so I got lovely sharp corners.
Oh, nice.
And they taste great when you rehydrate them, but I had to double bag.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, if you're freezing dehydrated stuff, you don't really have the problem of it getting freezer burn.
Yeah.
I've also vacuum seal. I bought a Verimark vacuum sealer, one of these hand jobs, ages ago, and it works well. I use it for sous vide. I use it for prepping. So if you get bulk meat, you can pre-spice it. You can get it all ready and vacuum seal it, put it in your freezer. And if your sous vide is you want to cook in it, you just put the frozen thing in, and it cooks for 8 hours or however long you want to do it for.
Yeah.
And you don't have to defrost it first. And for curing meats, it's great because you need to get your salt ratio right, and you either do equilibrium method or you just salt the meat till it stops making moisture, which ends up being very salty. So with the equilibrium method, you weigh out the percentage of the salt and you put it in the bag with the meat, and you vacuum pack it, and you just keep turning it every day, like with making bacon. And then you know that at a certain point the meat is properly cured, and then you can smoke it and you take it out of the bag and do what you need to do to it.
Yeah, I've never tried curing meats. I've made my own biltong in the past, which was edible, but it wasn't great. But you've done quite a bit of curing and meat preservation.
Yeah, it's we can get into it at a later episode and stuff.
Okay,
but
cool.
I've done pastrami and bacon. I've made shelf-stable bacon. It had all the salt in it.
What do you mean by all the salt?
Well, as much as you could possibly get in the bacon that was in the bacon. So you slice your bacon and let the slices lie in a bit of water to desalt it. You didn't need to if you were going to use the bacon in like a stew. You just don't add salt, and make sure you have a bland starch with it.
Okay. Yeah, it's not something I've ever tried, but I look forward to experimenting at some point. And like making biltong is like almost a South African pastime, I would say, but making other meats, cured meats, that's something, it's definitely something I would like to get into one day. Maybe we can even do an entire episode on how to cure meat.
Yeah, it would be nice, because biltong is South African pastime, but if you take a biltong and put it in your dehydrator and really dry it out, you can powder it and then add tallow into it, and you make I think they call it pemmican, and it's like a block of stuff that lasts for 20 years.
Yeah, that's that stuff that lasts forever.
Yeah. And it's a high nutrition. It's a great survival food.
Yes. So I've done, with the dehydrator, we made some different stocks for soups and stuff.
Yeah.
And we used the mushrooms. Recommendation, if you're going to dehydrate mushrooms, powder them afterwards. Don't use them as mushroom slices or whole mushrooms. The texture is funky.
Yeah.
It's not great. But if you want to get that mushroom flavor and the nutrients from the mushroom is one of the only things that actually keeps all its nutrients when dried. And with that powdered mushroom, you can make a really nice stew stock or powdered stock. So we use just your normal assortment of herbs and spices. So obviously salt, mushroom, some little bit of coriander in there, rosemary, and then nutritional yeast. If you can get hold of it, nutritional yeast is a wonderful thing. It makes everything taste like chicken.
Is that chicken stock that you made that's got no chicken in it?
That's vegan chicken stock.
Yeah.
And it tastes like chicken. You can throw it into soup and it tastes like chicken soup. And there's no animal products in it.
I suppose
it's a lot better for long-term storage that way.
Yeah. So I suppose without any chicken fat or something in it, it should have a longer shelf life.
Yeah, there's nothing that can go rancid.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's about all for today. We've been here for over an hour recording this, and we've got an interview lined up that I will let you know more about now. Up next, we are going to listen to an interview I recently did with Gavin Coleman while on a trip to Cape Town. Full disclosure, I have known Gavin for over 20 years, and he was one of my original instructors when I was learning Krav Maga. Gavin is the lead designer and knife maker at Ironside Edgeworks in Cape Town, South Africa. Over the past 7 years, they have produced some of the most effective and sought-after defensive EDC knives in the world, being used by both civilians and professionals in some of the most demanding environments and circumstances. Gavin has also personally worked with some notable personalities in the industry, including both Craig Douglas, South Narc, and Terry Trahan, who is also the brand ambassador for Ironside Edgeworks. Gavin has spent more than a decade in the self-defense and combatives industry, having been a full-time instructor in combatives and pre-incident skills for Kangol Defensive Systems, where he taught both civilians and law enforcement. He is also the co-author of the acclaimed book, The Mall, Preparing for the Chaos of Close Combat. So, without further ado, let's listen to the interview with Gavin. Okay, welcome back with Gavin. Gavin, welcome to Off-Grid Survival. How are you doing?
Good, and you?
Yeah, good. Good to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah.
So, as I said in the intro, Gavin is a knife maker and also author of the book The Mall, or co-author of the book The Mall. Gavin, how did you get interested in the combatives industry?
So that happened a good few years ago now, about more than a decade. I kind of started out like anyone or most other people do when I sort of felt a need for learning self-defense and just started exploring different options and looking at what options were available at that time.
Yeah.
And I was also perhaps fortunate enough to be working in an environment in the tactical industry, supplying equipment and gear.
Okay.
And so I had a lot of influence from people in customers and that kind of thing. So I got to experiment a little bit with different options and different styles and systems and things like that. And yeah, over the years, I just sort of gravitated towards the more what at the time was called the reality-based combat systems. So things like Krav Maga were very big at the time. And that's just sort of been my foundation from there.
Yes.
And so, yeah, through the years of doing that and then getting proficient at certain things, I started instructing as well, part-time instructing and then full-time instructing, and then it just sort of naturally grows from there.
Yeah, because I remember training with you going back, nearly 10 years now, I think it was, when you were with Kangol Defensive Systems.
Yeah.
You and Skulk, and that was quite an experience for me. I'm not the fittest guy in the world, and you had us running and doing push-ups and stuff that I hadn't done since high school. But yeah, no, it was definitely an interesting time.
Yeah, those days were interesting because we were doing something very different from anything. Well, I'm very out of touch with the sort of industry now, but at the time it was very different from what anyone else was doing. In that we were very much holistically looking at the self-defense as an entirety, not just in terms of the fighting, which is what people get stuck on these days.
Yeah, because it wasn't your usual judo and karate and doing katas and that sort of stuff. It was, that's what I remember. It was very organic, if I can put it that way.
Yeah. Oh, look,
it flowed nicely, and it was the stuff that you taught us made sense. It it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't carters. It wasn't taking a position and doing X, Y, Z to fight in a tournament. It was, as you said, reality based. It was real life. What's going to happen if a guy comes at you with a weapon?
Even then, within the quote unquote reality based systems, there's reality and then there's reality. And so that is one of the things that's a bit unfortunate about the market, if you want to call it, because it is a commercial market.
Yes.
There are people trying to make businesses out of it, and understandably so. They have to structure that business in a certain way to keep clients coming back, paying their rent and all that kind of thing. And it's very difficult to balance the commercial needs of a training center with the needs of the actual student. So like you were saying, with the difference between martial arts and combatives is that martial arts are effectively sport focused.
Yeah.
Sometimes art focused as well, depending on the specific martial art, but it's primarily sport focused in tournament fighting and that kind of thing. And that's a very different thing from self-defense.
Yes.
The problem is with the self-defense industry in general, it's also very focused heavily on technique rather than methodology and outcome. For us, the big thing was actually outcome. Techniques are what people get fixated on and focused on and go, I want to learn. I mean, I remember, so back in the early days of my craft training, there was, off the top of my head now, I'm thinking probably about 25 to 30 pistol disarms that I learned.
Okay.
Which is of pistol
That's
disarms.
a lot of stuff to remember.
It's a lot of stuff to remember in the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
And so we really wanted to get away from the technique focus, because in the commercial systems, they really use technique as a means to bring people back.
Okay.
So it's like this year we've got these new techniques you have to learn that we've come up with for, and it's a lot of the time it's inventing a solution to a problem that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah.
And so that keeps students coming back. It keeps people coming to the seminars. It keeps people buying the books or the DVDs or the whatever.
Yes.
But it doesn't actually solve the problem or give the person proficiency in what they're looking for. So if someone comes to me and says, I need to learn self-defense because I'm really worried about my safety, there's a very ethical question about whether you take that person and say, sure, I want to enroll you in this 3-4 year system where I'm going to keep teaching you stuff that you don't really need to know, versus, cool, I'll give you 6 months of training and you'll go out into the world not knowing everything, but knowing enough.
Yeah.
And I think for us, the balance was more on the make people proficient, give them what they need, and let them go into the world and just practice what they know, rather than becoming a hobbyist and continually learning stuff that they don't need to actually learn.
Well, I think one of the most important things that I've always remembered from what you guys said to us is that if a guy comes at you with a weapon and asks for your wallet, you're not going to go straight in and fight that. Give the guy your wallet. And the odds are he's going to leave and, you've lost your wallet. You've got to apply for a new ID or a new driver's license. But you haven't got yourself into a situation where you can get injured.
Yeah.
You're safe, which is the important thing. And from a preparedness point of view, looking after yourself is very important, obviously. So you want to get to a point where I think you're not getting into situations which will get you into trouble. So that's where I think situational awareness and like the whole gray man kind of vibe comes in a bit.
So that speaks to actually outcomes.
Yeah.
And that's a word we used to throw around a lot because it actually makes a lot of sense, is that what is your outcome? What are you trying to actually achieve? And this can speak to your self-defense training, your preparedness training, your whatever training, is that what are you actually wanting to achieve with this? And if you're talking about self-defense, if my outcome is that I don't get hurt or killed, then really fighting is not the best solution to that problem.
Exactly, yeah.
It's not the best way to get to that outcome. It's actually it's only a small part of what if. If I need to fight, then I need to know how to do that. But if I can avoid fighting entirely, that's the best way to get to that outcome of not getting hurt.
You want to not get into a situation where you're forced to fight.
Yeah, so people need to think about outcome with whatever they're preparing for or training for, is what do I want to actually achieve with this?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people just get stuck on the technique training and thinking they're going to win fights. And for me, I don't care if I win a fight. I don't want to get hurt or killed.
That's
actually, and obviously that means that doesn't mean that I should give up my valuables anytime someone asks for them.
True.
Sure. I mean, that's not what I'm saying at all.
You've got to read the situation.
You've got to read the situation, and every situation is different. And the problem with violence is that violence is entirely unpredictable. There are so many variables about violence that you cannot ever predict. Even I can't predict if I'm meeting someone for the first time. I don't know what they're capable of. I don't know where they're at in terms of their experience. I don't know where they're at in terms of their willingness to do damage and to kill someone.
Yeah.
Like you get people who are very willing to, at a drop of a hat, to kill someone because that's the environment they grew up in. Yeah. And so you don't know where people are on that scale. You don't know where they are on a sort of psychological scale. You don't know where they are in terms of their fitness and their capabilities. The list is quite endless in terms of variables when you're meeting anyone on the street. And so avoiding that violence is actually the best way to secure your safety. If you have to go there, then you have to go there. But it's also then it becomes about outcome of like, what do I need to do to get out of the situation? Because that can be a variable as well. So there's so many people who are on training for dynamic decision-making ability and being able to actually make that decision in the moment. Is that most of your commercial training is to use the technique, do the damage, sometimes lethal damage to the person, and then deal with the consequences later, which is a really flawed mindset to have.
Well, that brings us to the legal aspect of it, which when we did our training, we did touch on, but we didn't go too in-depth. And I know you guys used to do a more in-depth course specifically on that, in that if I get into a situation where a guy's got a knife or a gun and I then pull out a weapon and I do end up killing the guy, I am legally liable. I can be held up for manslaughter at the very least, I believe.
You could, yeah, but it's actually very. People have this flawed idea about what the law is in South Africa, and people often say the law favors the criminals, which it actually doesn't. If you actually understand the law, it's actually pretty cut and dry what you can and can't do. First disclaimer: I'm not a legal advice giver, so just bear that in
neither
mind.
am I.
But from what my understanding of my teaching has been, basically the law is pretty clear on what is, I'm just trying to remember the actual terminology they use. So life is valued over property, first of all. So life is more valuable than things. Yes. So if someone wants your phone, but they're not threatening your life, you can't kill them for that.
Okay.
Because their life is more valuable than your phone.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the sort of first premise that our law is based on, is that life is more valuable than property. It's a very different thing if someone is threatening my life in order to get my phone. Okay. So that's where the law becomes a bit of a difficult thing for people to judge. So if by the simple fact that I am pointing a gun at you means I'm threatening your life. Okay. Regardless of context. If I pull out a gun now and I point it at you, you are legally allowed to defend yourself. Okay. Okay, because you don't know if I'm going to pull the trigger or not. You don't know what my intentions actually are. Even if I'm saying just give me your phone, you don't know if I'm going to pull the trigger still.
Yes.
Okay, so the threat of lethal force is enough to justify lethal force response. Okay. So what dictates lethal force or lethal force threat is a weapon, a lethal force instrument. So that would be a firearm is a lethal force instrument, and an edged weapon, a knife, is a lethal force instrument. So those are things that can legally, under legal defensibility, can take life. So obviously there's other things as well, things like a brick. You can kill someone with that quite easily as well, but it's not recognized as a lethal force instrument because there's some variability there. It also becomes a bit of a gray area in terms of ability. So a classic example would be a woman defending herself against a man. Okay, so the law sort of recognizes that a woman has a disadvantage in that scenario, and so it's more justifiable for her to use lethal force, even if the man doesn't have a lethal force instrument, than it would be for a guy on a guy. Yeah. So it's very much a contextual thing, but the overarching kind of principle here is you have to be able to articulate why you felt your life was in danger.
You've got to be able to defend yourself in a court of law.
You have to be able to explain why you did what you did. Yes. And if your answer is just because while he was trying to take my phone, then that's not a good enough argument.
Yeah.
You have to be able to explain, oh, he had a weapon and I felt like my life was in danger. And that becomes into other questions they're going to ask is, well, the person has to have the ability and the means. So what I mean by that is if I have a security gate between me and you have a knife, you have the ability, but you don't have the means.
Yeah.
You can't actually get to me with a knife. But if you have a gun, you still have the ability and the means.
And the means, yeah.
So there's a big difference between, yes, technically you have a weapon and you could hurt me, but can you hurt me right now? No.
Okay. No, that's interesting.
So,
I never thought of it that way before.
Which is also where people get into trouble when it's something that's after the fact. So just a sort of scenario would be something like someone runs into a house and grabs the TV and runs away with it, and you then chase after them and shoot them. That's really
not
illegal.
on, yeah.
Okay, because now that threat is gone.
Yeah.
You're not in danger anymore. Now you've actually put yourself in danger in order to confront the person.
Yes.
So there's a lot of gray area in context and actually understanding the dynamic of the situation. It's very defensible if you are in direct threat or someone near you is in direct threat. You are 100% allowed to defend yourself or them.
Okay.
But you have to be able to justify why you did what you did and articulate that your life or their life was in danger or very imminently going to be in danger.
Okay. So obviously we're now talking about defense with knives and with guns, and your main business is designing and making specifically combative knives.
Defensive knives is the term we like to use.
Defensive knives, sorry. Okay. So how did you transition from the combatives industry of the training side into the knife making side?
That's a good question. So basically in about 2016 or so, is when we were busy writing them all, or doing the research for writing them all. So the research phase was about 1.5 years long.
Okay.
Of me and Skulk basically practicing ideas, playing around with ideas, sort of testing the theory a little bit of what the book is actually about. And in doing that, we were kind of also putting together a methodology for knife combatives, knife defense, or knife on knife work, basically. And so within doing that kind of research, we kind of found that for us, I mean, obviously this is a very personal thing. I don't want to get into the debate about which is better, because it's not about that. But for us, the Pickle style knife was actually the one that we felt was the best methodology for getting someone who's a complete novice up to speed very quickly, getting them proficient very quickly.
Okay.
It's a style of knife that lends itself to very base movements, nothing too fancy. It's not like karambit, which can be effective, but it takes a long time to get very good at that.
Yes.
And so we felt the Pickle methodology actually fit what we wanted to do as a business and in our training methodology the best. So where this ties into the knife making is at the time I was full-time training, full-time instructor, and I couldn't really afford the custom knife from a friend of mine, Xavier Knox. Couldn't afford to buy one, so I had to make one. Okay. And so that's what I did. I went into the garage and I made one, posted my work on Instagram like anyone normally would, and other people were like, that's really cool, can you make me one? And then that kind of just snowballed into over a year or two into becoming a business. Eventually I was making 10 or so of them a month, and I was like, okay, this is actually becoming a serious business now, and like it just grew from there. And 7 years later.
Has it been that long now already?
7 years ago.
Okay.
And
so I've got one of your earlier blades, one of the Shrikes, which I've actually got with me. I carry it pretty much wherever I go. It's great. It's a nice flat knife. It goes on a belt clip inside my jeans, and you can't even with my belly, you can't notice it. And you use a lot of different materials. Over the years, I've noticed you've gone from standard like steel and G10 type handles to some quite elaborate Japanese influenced stuff. The Japanese aesthetic seems to definitely pull through with your work nowadays.
Yeah, look, I mean, we still do the very basic stuff. Obviously, there's always going to be a market for purely utilitarian, functional blades, especially with professional guys like law enforcement and military guys. And we'll never stop doing that. But in terms of the actual knife making business, there's obviously a large collector element as well.
Yeah.
And so we cater a little bit to them, but specifically with custom work. But then in between, there's like a sort of space in between the completely utilitarian and very high-end custom, which I like to fill and straddle that sort of gap of where that Japanese thing comes into play. And the reason what sort of took me in that direction was simply just because I really like the way the Japanese culture viewed their swords.
Okay.
So it wasn't just a tool. It wasn't just something used for fighting. It was actually something you should look after and revere. And it's a reflection of your personality and your status in society.
Okay.
And so often those things were passed on from generation to generation, well looked after, maintained. And I felt like that was a good philosophy to have in modern day culture where everything's just disposable and throw away.
Yeah.
Everyone's looking for the cheapest possible solution and doesn't care if it breaks and wants, replace it, And I kind of wanted to get away from that and create let's not beat around the bush, it's a weapon that is used for your personal preservation that you should be very cognizant of looking after.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the idea of look after it so it will look after you one day.
Yeah.
And so we specifically didn't use things like stainless steels. We wanted to use sort of more primal kind of old school steels that do rust if you don't look after them. But the idea is to look after them and make sure that you maintain your equipment and look after your equipment. And then also the sort of slight variations aesthetically that will sort of give a bit of personality to it and kind of lend itself to what you feel is important and what you like to portray in the world. And that aesthetic is also what I liked about the Japanese sort of handles in particular, is where most of our aesthetic sort of lends itself is in the handle, is that it's kind of functional, but also done as best as possible. So on a Japanese sword handle, for example, you'll notice that like everything that's there has a function and a purpose.
Yes.
Everything is there, apart from one small element in the middle of the handle, you could argue it doesn't have a practical function, but maybe has a spiritual function. Everything there has a reason for being there. But in this typical Japanese way of doing things, it's done to the best possible ability to make it the most beautiful it can possibly be. Yeah. And so I really like that idea of having things that are purely functional, but also made to the best they can be and finished to a very high degree and just made aesthetically pleasing. And so that's kind of where we like to be, is to straddle this world between purely functional and purely artistic and be somewhere in between where it's functional and artistic.
Yeah, I saw one of your pieces on Facebook the other day that I think it had buffalo horn end pieces, and they'd been polished to like this
mirror polish.
It was really stunning.
Yeah, I really like buffalo horn for that because you can just polish it up to be like a black mirror.
Yeah, I know. It was really great. It definitely stood out. We took a little bit of a break there. There's some workmen outside, so if you do hear some background noise, sorry about that. Nothing much we can do about a guy with an angle grinder, unfortunately. Okay, back to the knives. I just wanted to ask you, your knives are quite obviously, like you described, Pickle style blades. It's a fixed blade knife. How do you feel that compares to like an EDC folding knife that a person would normally carry?
Okay.
Obviously, they're for totally different purposes. But in your opinion, what do you think?
Okay, so the sort of traditional thinking behind fixed blade knives for self-defense specifically is just that they're integrally stronger.
Okay.
I mean, you're dealing with a solid piece of steel that's one piece. So a folding knife obviously has a hinge in between the handle and the blade, and that's structurally a weak point. I say that nowadays, I mean, the locking mechanisms on folding knives are very, very good.
It's not like the old Swiss Army knife days.
Yeah, it's much better than it used to be. So that's a very much debatable point, but there's a couple of other things as well. So what we do is we make knives specifically for self-defense or defensive carry, which means concealed carry. So that's another thing to understand between the difference between a fixed blade and a folder is accessibility. Getting your fixed blade out of a sheath on your belt, even from concealment, you can do, if you practice well enough, under a second draw. Whereas a folding knife, even if you get it out your pocket, you still got to deploy it and then get it into position to actually use. So it's inherently slower and also limits your ability of where you can actually carry it, where sort of a fixed blade is traditionally mounted on your belt line, on your waistline. In sort of power triangle terms, it's difficult to explain, that's just over audio, but you can access it with both hands, basically, is what it comes down to. You can access it with your weak hand, your strong hand, single-handedly. So it gives you just a bit more flexibility and a bit more versatility in that sense as well, which is also very important, I think. So from a purely sort of understanding what it's for, I think the fixed blade kind of lends itself better to self-defense and concealed carry than a folder does. That's not to say that a folder can't be used, but you must just understand its considerations that, you going to be limited in terms of where you can actually carry it, and your accessing of it's going to be a bit slower and maybe a bit more cumbersome. It's not to say you can't, but just have to think about it differently. That's all.
Yeah, because myself, I carry a folder every day. It's in my pocket. I don't go anywhere without it. I carry my shrike a lot, but not all the time.
Yeah, that's okay.
I use my folder for everything. I open boxes with it. I open bags with it at work and that sort of thing. I would never use my shrike for the same purpose. So my EDC blade is more of a general purpose blade, where the shrike is more, as you said, something that I'm going to use for a specific situation.
So I use mine to open boxes all the time. So don't. It's to me, a knife is a knife. It's like, it doesn't really matter as long as you can comfortably do the task with it.
Okay,
it's fine. But I know there's people out there who do that very traditional thing of like, I have my folder for my EDC tasks and my defensive knife just for that, and that's also fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't want to carry around a whole tool belt full of stuff. So I just use the one knife I've got.
Okay, no, cool.
And also on that note, like, I also don't carry the same knife all the time. Like, there's plenty of times where I will go out with nothing. If I'm going down to the shop, people seem to think that you have to be tooled up all the time. And for me, it's like, understand the risk, your risk profile. Like, what are you portraying to the world? Are you a high risk target? Are you a high value target rather, or not? Where are you going? Are you going down to Camps Bay, shopping mall on the promenade, or are you going into the township?
Yes.
There's a very big difference between those two places. And so I'm going to kit up accordingly to where I'm going to go. I know that kind of goes out of the prepper mindset of being prepared 100% all the time. But I think like, you can't really live your life waiting for something to happen no matter where you are. It's like, just do some understanding of the risk profile of the places that you're going, and then gear up accordingly.
Yep.
I mean, right behind you, there's a plate carrier, level 4 plate carrier sitting there that's mine. Like, I have that stuff, but it doesn't mean that's in my car in the boot for any kind of, it's there for the time it might be necessary, but that's not all the time. And so I'm not taking that everywhere with me. I'm not taking, hundreds of different weapons with me everywhere. I'm taking what I need, what I think I'm going to need in the situation for where I'm going.
Okay, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Because you can, as a prepper, you can become very paranoid very quickly.
Well, you can get
you go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, you get down the rabbit hole and you get bogged down in like, I need this, I need that, I need this. And you might. I'm not saying that these things are have no value, but it's just understanding your risk profile and your sort of, you have to kind of look at yourself through the lens of a criminal. Do I look like a high value target? And the sad reality of this is that as long as you look like a more difficult target than the next person, you're probably okay.
Yeah. Well, this is where we get to the whole like tactical thing as opposed to tactical.
Yeah.
Where there's so much gear out there now.
Well,
that every second guy's wearing cams with a nice big heavy belt and carrying a tactical looking backpack, and that goes also for me against the whole grey man type philosophy of trying to blend in, because all you're doing is you're actually standing out.
But I mean, blending is also a very contextual thing, because blending
depends on where you are.
It depends on where you are, but like, we blend in here because we live here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, in actual fact, if you want to blend in South Africa, you probably should dress like a homeless person, because that's 50% of the population.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay. So so if you really want to blend in and be grey in South Africa, go live in a township.
Yeah.
Okay, but no one wants to go take the cosplay that far, do they? It's like, I think a lot of people get trapped in this idea of what they're supposed to be. This is like an exciting hobby for them, and it's like, well, I've got to have this gear and that gear, and I've got to dress this way and wear these pants and wear these boots, and like, it's really not necessary. It's like, that's putting equipment over skills.
Yes.
First of all, which is a huge problem, and it's putting stuff over outcome.
Yeah. So I get asked quite often when I talk to people about preparedness, what do I think is the most important thing as a prepper that you can have? And the first thing I always say is knowledge. If you can learn anything, you can learn skills in combative and defensive arts. You can learn how to grow stuff. If you don't prepare your mind first, it's going to be very hard to do anything if something does happen.
But preparing your mind is not just about learning skills, it's also about resilience. And that is one of the biggest things that people lack these days is resilience. And so I can give you lots of examples, but like if we take the load shedding crisis in this country as an example of that, there's so many people out there in this country, in our neighborhoods, who can't go 2 hours without electricity. Their life falls apart. They have to have a generator to plug the TV in. They have to have UPS for internet backup. They can't live 2 hours without electricity. Like if you want to be a prepper and be prepared for the unknown, but you can't go 2 hours without electricity, then you're already quite because your mindset is completely dependent on something.
Yes.
And this dependence on things is actually where I think people need to sort of train themselves to be resilient against dependence on things. And that can be dependence on anything, like, whatever.
The cell phones are a classic example. You see the Wi-Fi go down and people start panicking because they can't send a WhatsApp. Or they can't look at the latest thing on YouTube. And I've fallen into that myself a couple of times.
Everyone has, but it's a thing of just learning to realize it's okay. And it's not to say that it's okay that we don't have electricity, because that's a different problem. That's a problem on an economic level. But on a personal level, I really don't care if the power goes off. Cool, it's a 2-hour break from life, as far as I'm concerned. It's like, I'll sit outside and watch the ocean or the sky or the stars or whatever. Like, just take that moment and enjoy it. But like, it's a resiliency thing. Like, people are, in our modern lives, people have become obsessed with the idea of comfort.
Yes.
And comfort is a very enticing poison that will kill you slowly over time. And this idea of pursuit of comfort is actually where we see all sorts of ills, like physical ailments, come in because people are just comfortable and like they don't do anything that's difficult anymore. Difficulty is so good for your mental resiliency, but also your physical resiliency as well. Like, and it's becoming a very trendy thing these days. But like cold plunging is a good example where it costs you nothing. Literally costs you nothing to do it, but people still won't do it. And it sucks. It sucks, but like, do it because it makes your life better, makes you better as a person, and makes your ability to deal with difficulty better.
Harsh situations.
You have to voluntarily do those things, otherwise you're not preparing your mind.
It's like the guys that go glamping. They tell you they're going camping, but they're staying in a marquee tent with mattresses and down duvets and a guy that comes and brings them their coffee in the morning, as opposed to the guy that goes out and still camping but makes himself a bivvy, as opposed to the guy that goes outside and makes himself a bivvy and sleeps on a roll mat with a sleeping bag under the stars. He's actually probably going to end up having more fun and learning a valuable skill.
Maybe. I've got nothing against glamping. No. that can be fun as well. But it's just, I think it
comes back to that resilience. It's
the willingness to actually do something that's difficult rather than do something that's easy. And I think, in this day and age, everyone's looking for the easy option for everything, the convenient option.
I look at a lot of the international YouTube videos and stuff on preparedness, and I look at what they have available to them. Say, for instance, just on the food side, with freeze dryers and freeze dried food, and being able to go to Walmart and buy a 10-gallon bucket full of powdered scrambled egg. Where in this country, South Africa is a very different country. We've got our unique challenges, but we don't have the variety of stuff that you can get overseas. We can order it at great expense.
But also, that comes back to what are you preparing for?
Yes.
Because if you think, if the nuclear bombs fall tomorrow, we're all pretty unless we're in the lucky position to not get hit. Okay. Yes. But even then, what are you going to do? Are you going to hold up in a shelter for how long? How long until that freeze dried egg runs out? Then what? Then what replaces that? Because you can't go to Walmart again and buy that.
Well, that's it.
So is that really the solution to the problem? And I don't think it depends on the outcome. It's what is the outcome that you're looking for? Is that I want to actually survive a difficult situation? Well, then the answer is not to buy stuff. The answer is to acquire skills and be self-reliant. And self-reliance isn't stockpiling.
Yeah. So there is from the preparedness aspect, there is having a certain amount of food to help you get through a difficult situation. But at the same time, like you say, knowing how to grow carrots or butternut or something like that, how to acquire what you need in that situation. I think South Africa is a very different country to, again, America. They've got their own unique problems that they deal with there, where they are such a global powerhouse that they are a target.
Well, look, I mean, look at who South Africa's allies are.
Well, let's not
that makes that if the hits the fan, that makes us a potential target as well.
Yes,
because of who've allied themselves
with the BRICS now.
And we are, for the most part, I don't necessarily make an assumption here, but at least for me, and I think for a lot of people of our demographic, we would be then allied with the people we actually don't want to be allied with.
Yes.
We would be fighting the people who we actually align our values with. So we're actually going to be put in a very difficult position.
Yes.
If that day comes.
Well, the demographic in South Africa is exactly the opposite of what it is in the States. But yeah, I'm not going to go into that in too much detail now.
Yeah.
We'll do a later episode with regards to that.
But I mean, the thing, the point of it is that you actually don't know what's going to happen. You can never be predictive about these things. You never know.
So as Ben and I were discussing the other day, for us personally, preparedness up on the garden route is if we have a situation again like the 2017 fires, and being prepared for a situation like that as opposed to a mass uprising are two very different things. And
look, in South Africa we've had those riots a couple of years ago.
The Durban riots.
I mean, when that kicked off, no one knew when it was going to end. And I have friends who were trapped in very dire circumstances in that and had to defend a spa because it was the only shop for 100 Ks. And they were coming for it, and like the whole community had to sort of band together and defend it.
Which was great to see how the communities actually did band together.
But again, it's a thing of like, we weren't ready for that as a country, as people. We were like, ammo was running short because there wasn't any left. And it's like...
Apparently civilians were handing ammo to the cops because the cops had run out of ammo.
Well, I mean, but that's what I'm saying. It's like, you don't know what's around the corner, and you can't, I don't think you can hoard your way out of a problem.
No.
It buys you a limited amount of time, but then after that, you have to fall back on skills and mindset and outcome. Know what is it I'm trying to achieve? I'm trying to survive. I'm trying to win a war. Whatever the outcome is, you have to be able to know that and then know how to apply certain techniques and tactics to get to that outcome.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So, as a small business owner in South Africa, I'm sure you've had some unique experiences, especially during lockdown.
Yeah,
that was a tough time for everybody. And is there anything from that side that you can?
Sure, it's actually quite a lot because I mean, as you say, running a business in South Africa is a unique challenge in and of itself. It's even more challenging when you're running an international business from South Africa because your logistics, both coming in and going out, are a challenge. Your banking becomes a challenge, and then dealing with expectations of customers who are first world, who think things can happen within 3 days. That doesn't happen within 3 days over here because, I mean,
Africa time,
load shedding, big issue there.
Well, especially when you're reliant on power tools for your business.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it also just doesn't affect just us. It affects our service providers as well.
Yes.
It affects delivery people, couriers, all that kind of stuff. So like the whole thing down the line just gets affected by this knock-on
whole
effect.
Whole
supply chain. And then also just, so like we've had issues with shipping knives. I mean, it becomes an issue every now and again. Luckily, the last few years has been fine. Seem to have found the way to do that properly, but that was a whole debacle in and of itself. During lockdown was interesting because at that time we were basically custom business primarily, and a lot of our business is primarily US based, so a good 85% of our customers are in the US, and we got a lot of people who put orders in with us and actually carried us through that sort of 2-month period of being locked down. The knock-on effect of that, unfortunately, is that the suppliers weren't ready to open up after those 2 months. So the actual supply chain took about 8 months or so to come back online. Yeah. And that was even more for like more exotic materials and stuff.
Well, I'm in the food retail industry, and going on 3 years later now, we're still seeing effects with some of our suppliers on from the food side.
Yeah.
There's some suppliers of basics that haven't got certain lines back up since lockdown. They shut those lines down, and they've literally terminated those lines because it's not viable to start them up again.
It's a momentum thing. It's like any manufacturing takes a lot of momentum to get it back up or to get it going, and then when you kill that momentum, it's the inertia. It's just to get that thing going again is so difficult because it's more resources, more time, expertise, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So we're in a position now where we're kind of finally catching up to that backlog of custom work. But I mean, it put us into 2 years of sort of being backlog, which is not easy for a small business to absorb. Like, you don't think of it at the time thinking, oh, it's just this 2-month period and like that's difficult enough. But then not realizing that this is going to be a knock-on effect for 2 years, 3 years. It's a very difficult thing for a small business to overcome, especially then compounded with the load shedding, the poor service delivery generally in this country. It's just terrible. Yeah. I mean, I've got so many foreign friends who like can't understand how we live when they come to South Africa, and that they deal with all the banks are terrible. Like, all the services in this country are terrible by international standards. And like, they don't know how we get anything done. It's like, they don't understand how we function like this because it's impossible to them. Yeah. And so people just don't really have a very clear, we don't see it because we're just born with it. This is normal. Yeah. This is our baseline. So like, I don't think people really understand how much better it could be in this country as well. So
and you've recently got a overseas partner.
Yeah, so that was a result of last year, just over a year ago now. In January 2023, we're at 2024 now. Yeah, so January 23, out of the blue, one day PayPal decided they're not going to support our business anymore, and our payment system was PayPal at that time.
That's what most people use for international payments.
Yeah, exactly. So our business was very internationally faced. So all our pricing was in dollars. And that was our only primary way of actually collecting or allowing a US citizen to pay in dollars and then receive it in a local South African bank account. And they decided to shut that valve off and turn that tap off for us. So like overnight, we were dead in the water in terms of being able to run a business.
What was the reason behind that? Did they ever give you a reason?
Because it's weapons. But there was no recourse. There was no like appeal process. There was literally an email saying, you're done. You can't. We had to remove PayPal off of our website. We had to disassociate ourselves entirely with the brand of PayPal.
Wow.
They were like, "You're done. You're not. No appeal. No nothing." And they seized all the money that was in our PayPal account as well. It was about $1,000 at the time that was in our PayPal account.
Wow. Okay.
So that was it. You're done. All your money's gone. You can't take any more money in.
It's not like you're an international arms dealer, dude.
Well, I suppose the technical definition is yes, I am, but like it's legal arms. It's a very different thing.
Yes.
It's not like we were supplying AK-47s or something. So yeah, so our business was pretty much dead in the water overnight. And then it took a lot of trial and error to find a new solution to how can we keep the status quo going? How can we not drastically change our business model and keep providing the same service, the same ease of payment for our 85% of our customer base.
Yeah.
And so that basically goes down to the road that we had to open a US business so that we could get a Second Amendment friendly payment gateway. So in the US, the Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. And so there's a lot of payment processors that are out there that are specializing in second or 2A friendly payments. So for firearm stores and that kind of thing, because a lot of major credit companies or credit card processing companies won't support the firearm sales or things like that as well. So it's become a niche industry in the US to have card processing that's actually friendly to the Second Amendment. Okay. So we were, as a US business, we then had access to that, but what we didn't know is that we had to have a US partner in order to actually have access to that. Okay. So you couldn't you could open a business as a foreigner, but you have to have a US partner to be able to get banking, which doesn't make any sense. So these are all things that you kind of have to learn as you jump through the next hoop, you find out another hoop, and then you're like, okay.
Sounds a bit like our BE kind of system.
You know what, like I always used to think South Africa was a difficult country to do business in. America is not that easy itself. It's like we think we have bureaucracy here. There's bureaucracy there as well. There's red tape.
Wherever there's governments, there's bureaucracy. So.
And they're the biggest government in the world. I think something like 3 million federal employees. It's like, that's a huge business.
Yes.
There's a lot of mouths to feed there. So a lot of red tape to jump through, taxes to pay. Yeah,
and
it's not easy.
You don't want to get the ire of the IRS.
But the long and short of it is at least it got our business up and running again. I think these things happen for a reason sometimes. It's like at the time it sucks. It's like this is a huge blow to us. But then in overcoming that, you actually stabilize and get even a better foundation. So like the fact that we have that now means that can't be taken away from us ever again. Like we've partnered with a card processing company that wants us to do business. That wants us to sell the products that we sell. So it's a very different thing of like what we had previously, where we were like skirting through this thing of like one day they're going to close us down. We don't know. These guys are like super woke and like don't want us to do. They don't even want us to exist, let alone anything else. And it's like now we've at least got a partner that actually wants us to do business and actually wants us to sell the things we sell. So in a way, it's actually better.
Yeah. No, definitely. Okay, that's been great chatting to you. I think we're going to leave it there. This has been a very interesting conversation.
Cool.
And we hope to see you up on the garden route sometime. You must come visit us.
Yeah, we'll do. Maybe at the end of the year again.
That'll be good. Okay, Gav, thank you very much.
Cool.
And
Thanks,
we'll see you soon.
Cheers, Ben.
Ben, thank you for joining me once again on Off-Grid Survival. It's awesome having you here. And we'll see you for the next one in 2 weeks' time.
In 2 weeks, yes. It'll be awesome. And thank you for hosting and giving up a part of your pause here to record. And for those listening, if you have any ideas of what you would like us to cover, please leave a comment and just let us know. Thanks.
Cheers. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Off-Grid Survival. For more info and updates, feel free to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Off-Grid Survival ZA. That's it for now. We will see you next time. And always remember, be prepared.